Welcome to the AI Adoption Podcast. I'm your host, Professor Ashley Braganza, and it gives me great delight to welcome Allison Gardner to this episode. Allison is the MP for Stoke-on-Trent South, and in this episode, Allison's going to be talking about the latest developments in the implementation of the government's AI action plan. She's also going to be talking about the importance of regulation and governance, particularly ensuring the balance between protecting, on the one hand, citizens and the consumers of AI products and services, but also ensuring that providers can innovate and develop AI services and products. In addition to which, Allison's also going to be talking about how SMEs can speed up the adoption of AI. A major part of the government's plan is to develop AI growth zones, and Allison is going to tell us about some of the challenges and the opportunities that she has encountered, particularly in terms of creating a growth zone within Stoke-on-Trent. And I've also asked Allison about the area around protecting the creative industry. And Allison is going to give us some really interesting insights how the government can go about protecting the rights of the creative sector while ensuring that innovators can use data effectively to develop new models. Allison, welcome to the AI Adoption Podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time out to join us and join me and the listeners today. Before we get started, can I ask you to just give us a quick background about yourself and your role in Parliament, please?
Well, thank you for inviting me to your podcast, Ashley. I'm very much looking forward to it. I'm the MP for Stoke-on-Trent South. Prior to my job there, here now as an MP, I was working as a senior scientific advisor for NICE, looking at AI adoption and regulation within the health sector. And prior to that, I was a lecturer at Keele University in data science, running degree apprenticeships there. And of course, I was a founder of Women Leading in AI. So I've been involved in the arena for many years.
Great, thank you. Allison, could you give listeners a quick overview of some of the significant government initiatives in AI at the moment, please?
Well, I think the most significant one with regards to AI was the AI action plan, which was written, in a collaborative way, but obviously led by Matt Clifford, which is the roadmap for how the government plans to move forward, and it's very exciting. So certain aspects of that is looking at UK AI sovereignty, so that how we can have the independence of that to lead, be a leading global a country within the AI race, as it's been called. I'm quite excited about that, particularly certain aspects of it. As one of the recommendations is looking at AI assurance, which is an interest area of mine. There's looking at massive investments in data centres around the country. So this is an area that a lot of MPs locally are very interested in, again, to try and make sure that we have the not just be able to have the data centres, but we also need the compute power to be able to run these large models that are happening now. And so there's a lot of investments in that approach. And of course, we have longer ones. We used to have it was the AI Safety Institute, that's been renamed now as the AI Security Institute, which I think was the right thing to do, to make sure that any of the AI systems that we have are safe, secure, and responsible. And the government itself is really wanting to move forward to be a digital technology government. So we are looking at digitizing all our governmental processes internally, as well as our public services, so that we can actually streamline and improve the public services that we offer.
I mean, that's a really wide range of initiatives that are contained within the action plan. And I just wondered if you could reflect on how AI could be extended, particularly into the public sector.
Well, I think the area obviously that I have worked most in is within the NHS, and of course, it's the plan, isn't it, to go from analog to digital, and so there is a big push to introduce AI in terms of in improving diagnostics, and so we can get people diagnosed faster and treated therefore faster. So that's a big push that we're getting through, and you see that with some hardware investments as well, with such as MRI scanners, but making sure that we implement these useful AI tools within areas such as the NHS. But it's not just the high levels, sort of like the sexy sort of subject areas such as diagnostics, being able to diagnose cancer or strokes faster and be able to get that throughput so people aren't on the waiting list. But actually, what would make a real fundamental difference to how the public sector works and the public services and what people's lived experiences is how we use it in more less trendy manners. So when I was running to be an MP, one of the big complaints was potholes in our roads. And of course, now a lot of councils now are introducing AI to not just to detect potholes that are already there, but also the ones that are beginning to develop. So it's using this AI, and my local council in Stoke-on-Trent are now adding these sensors that we have, which they've mapped everything to bin lorries, because of course bin lorries go everywhere, and so now they're going to map all of these potholes so we can have this fast and responsive way of treating potholes, because it really was probably one of the biggest complaints in the general election. So it might not make front page news as much, but running these management systems, these customer service systems will work better, particularly within transport.
Yeah, I mean, the issue of potholes I mean, that is absolutely a huge national issue. And I know just if I reflect on my drive into work, it even on some of our local roads, it's everywhere. And yes, using AI in that way can really make a difference in people's lives. Um, I mean, we talked about the health service, and clearly one of the issues around the health service, particularly to be able to use AI, is around gathering that data. And there's been a significant amount of discussion at the moment about how fragmented data is in the NHS, but also thinking about other government departments. Um, what are your thoughts in terms of how some of that data might be brought together more effectively for the use in AI systems?
Well, within the NHS, they are addressing that, and I have going to apologise now because the name has just escaped me. But they are developing this one great big sort of data source for it, so it's all going to be managed, this data library. And we also have things like the biobank as well for data that we can do. It's getting the balance right between having that central data source of NHS data, which is really vital that the government is working on, but ensuring that we maintain people's privacy, and that that's quite challenging to do, because previous research shows that you only need 3 data points and you can identify an individual, and they can be quite disparate, but it's not actually hard to identify people. So ensuring that the data that we have is appropriately anonymous in terms of people wanting to use it for research, but also the data that we really want, which will make a real difference, is interconnecting with all of the health services and with the public services. And this is something that the government is looking at, with sort of this one gateway, this one stop shop, if you like, of all digital services, where you get that data sharing sharing between different services, which often comes a major block into trying to interconnect, for example, health and social care. And so having that data sharing will be really important, but security of that data sharing is vital. And so, as well as, we have various bills going through, which is the Data Use and Access Bill, which I know we will come to, but we will also have issues such as, bills coming forward like the Cyber Security and Resilience Bill that will come forward, is to make sure how we can allow that data sharing between public services, but make sure it's secure.
And I guess talking about that whole area of privacy and security brings to mind the issue of governance. And clearly, AI systems are continuously learning. What are your thoughts in terms of how these AI systems can be governed effectively as they're being adopted through the public sector?
It's a huge concern of mine, and if I dare be risky, one criticism I have of the AI action plan is that there was only one recommendation that really dealt with AI assurance, and which for me includes proper accountable governance programs that we are there. We are swamped with principles, which are guidelines, and we see that many of the big tech companies have lots of very laudable principles, but when you start digging deep, there's real issues as to actually whether they are holding to them and the workarounds with them. There's very little statutory requirements, so the government has just released this transparency standards, and they're very keen to promote that, and looking at how we can make that a sort of model where we can look at companies and public services and say that we have that assurance that they are, we can see what the data is that they're using, we can see how the model is working, and so we can have some level of accountability, but they aren't statutory as questions of whether they can be or not. What I would really like to see is actual statutory governance programs. I know this was something I was passionate about within the NHS. It's a little bit piecemeal at the moment, with all the different regulations, the different regulators that are involved, different trusts and and ICBs all working in their own way, and there isn't a standardised way of doing it, and there's that causes two challenges, and this can be mapped throughout the country in other public services as well. It is really hard for innovators not only to get their innovations into deployment and scaling up through organisations such as the NHS, but also because there isn't a coherent governance framework. For small innovators, it's really hard for them to do their post-market surveillance that they need to do and the vigilance that needed to do. And because there's still questions about liability, where liability lies within the public services, there is a lack of realisation that the people implementing that technology have a duty of care and actually can have that liability attributed to them. And so without that governance framework, that they can show that due diligence and that they have been very careful, and then they can have that level of accountability, and where there are problems that they can absolutely identify those and deal with them. I would really, really like to see some statutory guidelines in terms of governance of AI systems.
And I think what you've done really well there, Alison, is highlight that actually this governance is not a single thing, but actually it seems to me that there are various layers that need to be thought through. Clearly, and you mentioned this, that there is a set of governance that needs to happen at the tech level, or the technology providers need to have some governance in place. But then I think you've also highlighted that the companies themselves that are providing services, say, to the public, or the government departments providing services to the public, need some governance in place. And then you've got the innovators, the people who are coming up with the AI, and need to ensure that there is due process and governance in place. I mean, that's quite a complex picture there. How do you begin to kind of start to make some sense of that, I guess, would be my question.
Well, there's been an awful lot of work done, and I always think that it can be a bit overwhelming. But
Yeah.
for example, if you are a developer, we have developing standards. So the one that often gets mentioned is the quality management system, like ISO 42001. Is, I think, correct me if I've got that one wrong, but that gets mentioned an awful lot. So there are some guidelines there. People now know about model cards. And using those, and so how we set the systems up will work in it. The NHS itself already has some processes where users and developers can actually make sure that they're doing their governance right. So there's something within the NHS called DTAC, for example. And then you can work through, and that people follow to the correct standards. But it's very complex, and that's all fine, but that's all to deployment. It's ensuring that happens post deployment in an effective way, all the way through to decommissioning, because that often gets forgotten. And I just think it can be very, very fragmented. And I suspect that in some public services, it's not even there at all. And there is some work, when you look at, are you using AI, and says, well, we don't know. Well, if you don't know if you're using AI in your ICB or your local authority or anything like that, then you are not governing it. And I think one thing to remember with AI, and I don't hold to the idea that it's just like any software or system at all. AI evolves, and it's responsive, not just in terms of its updates, but the models will naturally have drift, they will naturally degrade, and they will be responding to a changing environment. And in areas such as diagnostics, for example, you change your operational procedures within your clinical practice. Believe it or not, that that can change your AI outcomes. Your population, your demographic subtly shifts, and that AI will respond to it, and its error rates might alter accordingly. And this is why, yes, the developers do their post-market surveillance, but that's for them to ensure the model's there. It's really important that the users know that that's happening, and trying to get that right. So understanding that AI is a changing product, an evolving product, and one that is responsive to its environment is really important to understand the reasons why we need governance by those using these tools for public sector and private sector services.
Yeah, and I guess what you've also done there really well is draw that distinction, because if I think back to the potholes example of using AI, the data that's been collected about a stretch of road, actually it's a data about a stretch of road. Yeah, it doesn't really, there's nothing personal about that. But when you're talking about health data or education data, or if you're talking about social services, social security data, that becomes very personal. And to what extent do you think maybe we need to also think about the sort of data that is being processed through these systems, and perhaps the governance and the regulations need to kind of in some ways take into account the different types of data that are running through these AI systems?
If I've understand that question correctly, I think you're absolutely right. And I think the EU AI Act has tried to do that to a degree, isn't it? With its
Yes.
risk stratification of its use. In the very, very, very first iteration of the EU AI Act, my memory serves, they hadn't included health as a high risk sector, which always surprised me. It was corrected as it went through, but it really always shocked me. And of course, when you have that stratification of risk, I will always argue, well, that's very subjective as to what you think risk is. And actually, you can have first order risk, yes, if you get a diagnosis wrong, or if that can be impactful and actually risk a death. So that will be high order, but there can be second order death a risk. So a bed management system, which would be considered a low risk, and we know about the one in America that was hugely biased and was sending Black men and women home, categorizing them by some weird criteria where they were equating spend as to levels of ill health, they were going home. And so they weren't getting the beds. And so, of course, that can then lead to death. So a bed management system might not be considered a high risk model, but it could have those second order effects. Same with education, though that long-term thing is you do that incorrectly and that can impact on a child's life chances. So risk is very subjective. So how you order, how you construct that. So again, I will argue this is why you have to have a context-based governance system which is flexible enough to allow for you to do those. And I love my algorithmic risk and impact assessments that you must always have, and those requirements, and then outline your mitigations for those for your individual use case and for your individual instance of an application of it, because that is the problem solving. It'll never be perfect, but it's showing that level of duty of care that you're trying to manage that.
Yes. And then having maybe some regulatory body or some regulation, some governance to ensure that it's actually followed through on, as you said, in terms of adoption all the way through to decommission.
See, now there you're hitting on a scratchy point from a political side of things, because you have these arguments that you can either have an overall AI regulator, so you have that horizontal regulation, if you like, so a little bit like the ICO is with data, or you have the vertical, which is sector specific, and understanding the very sector specific ways that we're doing it. I mean, we do have the it's called RIO, which is Regulatory Innovation Office, which is looking at how we can do that horizontal management of regulation across. But lots of people are asking me about the AI Act. When I became an MP, because, when's the AI Act coming out? When's the AI Act coming out? And I sort of always argue, says, well, the one that was put forward for this sort of singular AI regulatory sort of bit of legislation, was for foundation models. Very specifically, and I will still argue that not everything is a foundation model, but everything can be machine learning. And I'm not even going to argue about what you categorize as AI, but actually anything that's machine learning isn't, won't be a foundation model, but still requires very, very bespoke regulation, in my view, for the reasons why I explained earlier. So at the moment, how that's going to work, I don't know. I think we are going down a sort of an oversight model, working with various organisations. So, and I get everything muddled up. So I think it's called the DCRF. Links with various organisations such as ICO, the Competitions and Markets Authority, though, in the finance sector regulators. The one that I came from, which I called ADAS, which is the AI Digital Regulation Service, was not a regulator, but it's an organisation where we get all the regulators trying to work together. So there's things like that happening. But at the moment, I think there's a lot more work needs to be done on how we manage that. And I would personally argue, and this is my personal opinion, not the government's, is that I think we need to have some relatively flexible AI regulation that is horizontal in some form.
Yes, because it seems to me that without a clear governance framework for organizations to work within, there is a high level of uncertainty. And speaking with companies, a number of them are kind of sitting a little bit on the sidelines. They're playing it, they're trialing it, but before the full investment goes, and they want to know what the governance, what the liability issues are that you've indicated earlier.
Interesting is I sit on quite a lot of round tables, and they're great fun, but with lots and lots of Microsoft and Google and the AI APPG, and we get
Yes.
all these big hitters and small startups all mixing together. They're fantastic. But one of the things that have come back to me is everybody's talking about the EU AI Act being quite restrictive. But what it's giving is certainty. innovators and businesses are knowing what they're having to deal with and they can work with that. If we are uncertain, they don't know which way we're going as a country, they don't have that lack of surety of how they can move forward because they don't want to have to start retrofitting things. So like you've just said, they're sitting on the sidelines waiting to see which way we go. And so we've got some really good positive signs from the government, real good plans. I think the AI action plan is very, very good, but I think some clear messages as to how we're going to regulate going forward would be very helpful to all innovators.
I agree. And there's a section of the economy, which is SMEs, which are absolutely vital to to our future in the UK, because not only do they make up a big chunk of the economy, they also provide a huge amount of employment, and AI could affect and will affect large numbers of SMEs in particular. Just wondered, Alison, from your point of view, what can be done to encourage SMEs to adopt AI?
A lot of work. The quick answer is, well, we need to educate and inform and
Yes.
encourage users to understand what AI is and understand how it can benefit them. And there are innovation, programs, and I can't remember the name of it. I am so postmenopausal, but there is some organisations that go out and they do help train SMEs up and small business. And I'm thinking about the retailers on my high street and the smallest ones who go, we don't have time. We're struggling as it
Yes.
is. We haven't got the time to invest and we haven't got the time to learn. But somebody else once said that we need sort of AI angels, if you like, coming in, helping and holding people's hands to try and do it. And I think there's a real case for investments in further investment in that, where these organisations will go out, and I wish I could remember the name of them because they are fantastic, go out and help them do that training. So people like me, an MP like me, we are using organisations, for example, Google will come and do big fairs and help and achieve that education and invite the businesses in and see what can be used. Obviously, it's beneficial to Google, obviously. Other big providers are available, but, trying to do that encouragement and education. So that's something to do that MPs, but we need the government to really, really support SMEs to do that and use it and have that, we talk about digital natives, don't we? With the Gen Zs and Gen Alphas and stuff and everything. And we need businesses to become digital and AI natives as well. But we need to show the benefits to them first. And obviously, if they don't know how it's going to benefit them, then they won't know. So I'm in it's not necessarily AI, but I'm a big fan of moving to e-invoicing, for example. So any business will talk about the impact of late payments on them. So using technology, and AI could well be involved with e-invoicing, linking with HMRC, just that alone with some of the what the government is doing, which is putting some restrictions on levels of late payments to help SMEs, which is great. Bringing that in, and I know their plans for it, will just be transformational, and then they will see the benefits, and that will really help SMEs.
Yeah. And I guess the other part to that is the government's also looking to establish AI growth zones, which again could encourage SMEs. What, from your perspective, are some of the challenges and opportunities in creating these growth zones?
Okay, I'll be really boring now and talk about grid access. So
Okay.
it's to do with energy and power. I mean, the government put out a call for AI growth zones, and I think they were very inspired by the number of local authorities that put in applications. Some of them are local authority led, some of them are led by private consortiums and stuff. And they wanted a certain level of power that they would need to run these big data centers. And the original one, brief was 100 megawatts to 500 eventually, but because of the impact that they have, they're looking at bigger ones. And so this is the impact. So help. I worked on one for Stoke-on-Trent, and I think it's a really viable, proposal. So we have to work on that. So we'll get these data center investments there. With us, we will, linking it in with a big eco park and dealing with the energy systems, that requirements and input. But we also need to upgrade the grid and having that access. And so you have these AI growth zones, but you start then seeing a wider system issues that you need to work on. So that investment is there, and the idea of it is you get your data center there, and then within these AI, these zones of investment, you will attract AI companies in, that you can link with the data center, link with with the power and stuff. So there's the whole development plan there, and it puts areas like mine, like Stoke-on-Trent, on the map. I mean, we are actually, we have 2 universities. We're already in a centre for Createch, for example, and we also do a lot with medtech as well in my constituency. So, and we do combining, for example, our advanced ceramics expertise with data and AI and stuff. You've got some real potential for there. So that's all. It's a long-term battle, but the government are really, really keen to do it, and they're really keen to make sure it's spread around the country and not just in the Golden Triangle, which is great, and with huge pride in that, in this country, and the investment in that. But we've got to spread the love a little bit out through the regions.
Yes. And at the risk of plugging the podcast, I have on another episode got Ali Tini from Kraken, which is part of Octopus Energy, and he's talking about some of the things that you've just talked about, Alison, the need for the country to really upgrade in terms of ensuring that energy can be not just generated, but then transmitted across to ensure that that the data centers and the AI growth zones have the energy that they need to be able to run, and doing that while trying to be environmentally friendly and ensuring we hit the government, well, the country hits its environmental targets as well. So that's on another episode.
Watch that podcast because he knows his stuff. I've seen him speak before. He's good.
And you mentioned Create Tech and some of the work that's going on, particularly around Stoke and ceramics, and which is kind of what Stoke is very famous for, and that whole region area is famous for. There's an awful lot of discussion going on about the protection of the creative sector, the creative industries, particularly in terms of ensuring that, on the one hand, companies have access to the data to train AI models, but then also ensuring that IP is protected. How do you see this circle being squared?
It's a challenging one, and I think the question from the government point of view is they want to. I am assured that they will be working on protection of creative IP in terms of the use of AI, and they will look at that, in a sort of a separate piece of work. And there's a lot of argument that the Data Use and Access Bill, it should be integrated into that, and this is what's ping-ponging between the Lords and the Commons at the moment, just trying to make sure that the system that's introduced, what the creative etc. is asking for, is a licensing model, and certainly not an opt-out model that is suggested at the moment. So at least ensuring that the bill that's going through now puts some controls in on that to make it important that in that interim period of that bill going through and any new bill coming through and regulation coming through with creative IP, that all our creative data is not hoovered up already. And I think when I spoke on this, and on one of the bits of research I saw, is that we are due within the next 5 years, and possibly as soon as next year, to have hoovered up for these big models all of human created data already. And the concern, I think, currently is it could be too late to actually protect our creative data. And I have a slightly different argument that I put forward, and absolutely you must must protect human creativity and the creative sector. Absolutely agree with that one. My concern is actually we risk the integrity of our AI models if we don't protect human created data. And the reason for that is, as Spotify, for example, has already got 18% of its content is AI generated. This will increase, and as you know, you will start to get models hoovering up this data. I call it hoovering. I'm female. I like to change the language, and stuff. I used to say that you don't have toolboxes, you have makeup bags. It's the same thing, but everybody goes, oh yeah, that's all, language matters. Anyway, hoovering up the data and starting to train on AI produced data. So you end up with this sort of virtual circle, or invirtuous circle, if you like, of just training models on AI data, and then you risk model collapse. And so my argument is it's in the interest of the AI sector to protect the quality of data it's using. Otherwise, we're going to just end up, and somebody in one select committee be joined with the Science, Innovation, Technology and the CMS select committee. We joined up, and one of the musicians that said we risk a vanillaization of our outputs, and you just end up with this blandness, and then those sparks of creativity, those paradigm shifting ideas. You can have it in health as well, where you get these outlier, very unusual situations. And there's always a risk there that if you deal with that one. It's why I'm really fussy about data cleaning and how you do your data cleaning and synthetic data. So it's a risk to the AI industry as well if we don't protect human created data, because you want good quality, broad data to train your new models on and keep it going on. So I think they should be a little bit more open-minded and kick back a little less on the arguments that are being put forward, and realise actually it's going to benefit them as well as the creative industry.
I agree. Otherwise, it just becomes almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the AI is using AI to generate new AI, and it just, yes.
Not the world.
We don't know.
It really isn't. And so I don't understand why there is this argument. I understand the difficulty the government has in thinking that this maybe is not the bill to include it in. I may disagree with that, and obviously a lot of work has been done to try and encourage to have that considered within this particular bill. But if not, we will have to work very, very hard, and I'm assured that this is on the cards, that we are working towards trying to protect creative content.
Allison, thank you so much for a fascinating discussion about what's going on in terms of AI at the current time. The issue of governance, I think you've made some fantastic points and brought that to the fore, and your reflections on some of the challenges that the government faces, particularly in terms of trying to balance the needs of some very vociferous, very strong stakeholders that are involved in moving AI forward. Thank you so much for joining the AI Adoption Podcast.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for having me.